Here we have the 970 G1 Gaming from Gigabyte in our good place to start computer. This is a really great setup. What we have here first is the user bench results that classifies it as a gaming battleship and a desktop battle cruiser. Specifically, the gaming is the area which we are interested in, where it actually with the 970 scored a 85%. Basically, for most of our builds, we normally see this. We see that on average we get higher than the 50th percentile, meaning the match of components we have in our systems tend to perform very well. The specific case we can see here with our good place to start thing, it's in the 79th percentile, with our CPU performing in the 85th percentile. Our 970 here, which the G1 Gaming is performing in the 85th. If you overclock it, you can of course get it higher. Same thing for the hard drives. The hard drives performing really well. The memory is performing really well. But the main important bit here is specifically the graphics card here, which says it is actually doing excellent, and now let's have a look at what the actual performance are when you look at games. Strike score. This is basically 3D Mark's P1080 test. As you can see, the graphics score is quite good. We've received a 9600 for here. The physics score is actually also quite good with this 65 watt 6600 processor. If you would want to get your physics score up, which helps for some of the newer titles, you can look at rather going for something like a 6700K or the 140 watt processors. But overall, this is a very good fire strike score. If we compare it to the online platform, basically what they're saying is a computer like this would be fine for VR. This is relative. It is the minimum spec for VR, a 970. Because of the match of components, we actually get a little bit above what you'd normally expect with this, but that is what we always aim for. So the 970, it's coming down in price. It's a good option. It still runs, if you're running a P1080, you can still set everything absolutely max, and if you have a look at the other video, you'll see what it does at higher resolutions as well. But yes, now let's go on and have a look what it actually looks like in gaming at P1080. Here we have DOTA running at P1080 with all settings set to absolute maximum. The frame rates we're currently seeing here is about 120. It doesn't seem to be going higher than that. If you move around quickly, you still seem to be locked in at that 120. It might actually be that we've reached sort of an artificial limit that's imposed in the game. But I mean, if you've got that much headroom, for P1080, this is definitely more than you'd ever need. And it also means it's sufficient if you're looking to run P1080, but with a 144 Hz screen, then you're still going to get excellent frame rates with that. Here we have Counter-Strike Go at P1080 with everything set to absolutely maximum speed. If you're looking at a rig like this for Counter-Strike, you will be very pleased to see that here that we're actually running at about 240, 250 frames per second. So this is ideal if you're looking at for faster refresh rate monitors such as the 144 Hz monitors. The standard ones are 60 Hz, which basically means we're generating a lot of very unnecessary frames. And I apologize for the jerkiness. That's my mouse I've got plugged in here, not the actual computer itself. But everything's completely smooth. Everything is running at very high frame rates. The highest we've seen while running around here now has been about 280 frames. The lowest I've seen it drop to has been about 240 frames per second. So for Counter-Strike Go at maximum settings, 970 is more than you'd ever need at P1080. Here we have Civilizations 5 running P1080 with everything set to absolute maximum. Full anti-aliasing, full everything. Game seems to be running very smoothly, and as you'd expect with a graphics card like this, as we're actually seeing about 230 frames per second, which is anything over 30 frames per second for a turn-based game like this would be more than sufficient. But yes, we're staying well above the 200 frames, so no problems whatsoever with something like Civilizations 5 here. Here we have Call of Duty 5 World at War, specifically the Nazi Zombies mode, just to have a look what kind of frame rates do we get at P1080 with the 970, and it's actually seems to be quite a taxing game this. We're looking here at roughly about 90 frames per second, which means for something like a faster refresh rate screen you might actually want to look at a slightly higher graphics card for this specific game, which is quite impressive for such an old game, as for the most part this graphics card is more than sufficient to run incredibly fast frame rates at P1080, which we're running at here. But yes, if you're just running normal P1080, it is again still more than sufficient. Here we have Skyrim running at P1080 with everything set to maximum. It already automatically defaults to ultra settings for this graphics card, which you would expect with a game that is a few years older. You can see the visuals still look amazing in this game. There is a remastered version of this coming out soon though. And unfortunately you can't deactivate vertical sync to see what kind of frame rates it would actually be able to run, but it's completely locked at 60 frames per second, basically no matter what we do. So for Skyrim, not a problem at all with a 970. Here we have Borderlands pre-sequel. It's currently seeing about 180 frames per second. If we get into a bit of action, we do see a bit of a dip in frame rates. There we got down to about 120. 180 again, so it's sort of in the range where you could look at a faster frame rate monitor and still be able to run it on the 970 with the setup we have here. Sort of staying at an average of about 140. There we see it drop down with a busy scene like this into the 90s. We're seeing mid 90s, 140, 160. So all in all, P1080, unless you're looking to constantly have the 144 frames for a faster monitor, it's more than you could possibly need. There with that jump we actually dropped down to about 85, but overall still stays very high, the frame rates. Here we have Project Cars running at P1080. It's running nice and smoothly. For some reason with the recording software it did not want to run in full screen mode, so we're running it as a tiny window, but that tiny window is actually P1080, and we're seeing sort of 130, 120 frames per second. Oops, the crash, 114 frames per second. But it seems to be running excellently at P1080 on the 970 here. There we drop down to 111 frames per second. But in general seems to be running quite nicely on here. Here we have Battlefield 4 at P1080. About 970. As you can see, it's running nice and smoothly. We're running everything on ultra presets here. Frame rates we're seeing is basically dropping down into about 110. But overall, it seems to be staying quite nice and high. There's 120, drop down to 105, down to about 90 through the bush. But great frame rates for playing at ultra settings, P1080. Lowest we're able to get on the test range here that we've been able to see is 90, and higher frame rates if you look at a scene like this, you get up to about 160, 120, 110. But overall, very high frame rates. 970 is probably sufficient to be able to really use a P1080 144 Hz screen, especially if you can get a hold of a G-Sync one, because then the slight dip in frame rates won't give you any frame shutter there. But overall, gameplay very smooth, as you would expect with those kind of frame rates, and that's Battlefield. This is Fractured Space. This is one of the newer titles in our benchmark here, and probably one of the ones with some of the best looking visuals. They're constantly upgrading their systems, so you actually don't require as high of a system as you used to get good frame rates on here. But we're currently running everything at maximum at P1080, and we're seeing 100 plus frame rates. We're just seeing sort of just over 100 while firing here. If we stop everything and just look around, we're seeing sort of 120, 125, but for a shooter game, more than enough frames to be nice and playable. Let's just see what happens if we get a bit of an explosion from blowing up this other ship. Only dropped down to 98, so still keeping way above our 60 frames per second, which is our target here. So again, Fractured Space on a 970, no problem at all.